E aí, gente, nesse vídeo a gente vai falar sobre inovação, novas fronteiras do mercado financeiro e especificamente de um assunto que tem pegado bastante atenção da galera aí nos últimos tempos, que são os criptoativos. Você sabe que Bitcoin e outras criptomoedas têm registrado aí preços recordes ao longo do tempo, especialmente por causa da volatilidade do mercado tradicional como bolsa de valores. E no mundo inteiro, vários países aí estão abrindo caminho para a adoção desses criptoativos, inclusive com debate sobre regulamentação, inclusive no Brasil. E hoje, para trocar ideia comigo sobre isso, quem vai estar aqui é a Rachel Conlan, que é CMO da Binance, que é a maior plataforma de criptoativos que tem no mundo, com 280 milhões de usuários. Você deve ter sacado pelo nome dela que a gente vai fazer essa conversa em inglês, mas fica tranquilo que a gente coloca a legenda para vocês aqui para facilitar. Então a gente vai falar bastante sobre a evolução da indústria cripto no Brasil e no mundo, que se mistura inclusive com a história da Binance, que é a nossa parceira de hoje, que já está há 8 anos liderando em crescimento e inovação. Então a Rachel vai contar pra gente como é que faz para de fato entrar nesse mundo, para usar criptoativos, e se você precisa saber muito, entender profundamente de Web3 ou não, e também as estratégias que a Binance tem usado para trazer mais gente para esse mundo de criptoativos de uma forma geral. Então, se você gosta desse assunto, fica aí que vai ter um monte de informação valiosa para você. Rachel, I'd like you to tell me a little about yourself and also why did you choose to work at Binance?
Two good questions. One, I am 25 years working now. I've spent, over 20 of those years working in media, entertainment. Before I entered into crypto, I was working in the sports and entertainment space and in the biggest agency in the world. We worked with everyone from Tom Cruise to Jared Butler, who I know you've had on the show, to Ronaldo. I worked a lot on F1. And it was through F1 that I suppose my eyes were opened up to the world of cryptocurrency and blockchain.
Yeah, because that's a very different world from where you came from.
Exactly. But what was extraordinary is Liberty Media had acquired Formula One. They were completely overhauling the platform. And I'm sure you've got some fans among your audience of the Formula One concept that have joined recently because the Netflix show and, all of the new initiatives that they've done around it. But as we were kind of building what was the marketing plan for Formula One and the different teams that I was working with, we kept getting incoming from cryptocurrency companies who were really interested to partner with F1 to reach new audiences. And obviously, Formula One is the most technologically advanced sport in the world. And these cryptocurrency founders were trying to find new ways to tell stories to introduce crypto into that space. And as I was speaking with these founders and I really had the opportunity to work and meet everyone, I started learning a lot about the Bitcoin standard, about the evolution of that space. It was still so young. This is 5 years ago. And if you think about it, Binance is only 8 years as a business and, the industry itself is only really 15 years old. So I had this extraordinary introduction to it. I brought some of the big cryptocurrency companies into Formula One and to work with different sports and entertainment talent. And one of the brands approached me and said, you seem really passionate about this space. And we'd love if you could help us understand how to do marketing. Because we know how to do digital assets and we know how to build tools, but we don't know how to tell stories about it. And I remember I went to my CEO at CAA Sports and said, look, I know I've got a dream job. My husband was very upset. He was like, are all my sports tickets gone from now? But I was so compelled by the fact that the blockchain could solve some major issues that we see with the current financial system. I suppose the biggest issue being that there's still 1.7 billion people around the world unbanked. And I said, if in 50 years or probably less than that, but if I'm on my deathbed and looking back at my life, what do I want to have done in the world? And even if I can play a tiny, tiny role in a positive transformation of our financial system, I decided that I would jump in. I was very lucky. I had a security blanket. The CEO was like, okay, I'll give you a year. If you love it, we'll support you. And if you don't like it, there's a job, you come back to us. So my husband was like, okay, I still get the tickets. I'm okay with that. And I made the jump in and I made that jump fully in about 4 years ago. And I haven't looked back since. I joined Binance just under 3 years ago. And it's been such a privilege, to be at the helm of the biggest cryptocurrency exchange globally. We're celebrating 8 years, but we just hit 280 million users. And
How many?
280 million.
Okay.
So, you know, what's extraordinary about that is like 1 in 20 people have a Binance account, which
That's
is pretty
crazy.
exciting. You
Yeah.
know, we're operating in 180 countries. Thankfully, I've got a very big team that, you know, understands, you know, how we need to build at the local level. I've got an amazing team here in Brazil that I love spending time with because, you know, you learn so much on the ground with them about how we need to adapt and what products and services we need to do. But ultimately, I joined because of the opportunity to put financial control back in the hands of individuals rather than it being dictated by systems that didn't necessarily always care for them. So, you know, we're in a really privileged position at the moment.
Well, since we are talking about that, how do you guys at Binance, how do you make it work around the world? Because there are very different cultures, and I mean, you're in 180 countries, you told me, and 280 million users. Yeah. Okay. Do you have a goal? Would you like to reach a goal? And how do you work to make it happen across different cultures, different countries?
So that's a great question. So when I first joined the company and I spoke to our founders, I was like, what's the vision? Like, what's the overall goal? And there was obviously a lot of discussion we had, but the one North Star that stuck out to me that they shared was that we want to hit 1 billion users.
1 billion users.
1 billion users. And I was like, please say that's as an industry, not as a brand, because I'm like doing the maths in my head and how much that work that's going to take. But no, really that's about the industry hitting 1 billion users. And the rationale behind that is we're still just passing early adoption into early maturation at the moment. Like we're as an industry at the same place that the internet was in 1990, if you think about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, that was when there was still skepticism about the internet. And you and I both know today, I certainly couldn't survive without the internet and the Google. Like I couldn't live my life. Well, OpenAI now, but, or ChatGPT. But, you know, what was fascinating to me is they wanted to hit that, you know, 1 billion users because that meant we were mainstream. And in order to get to that point of mainstream, you know, the world of cryptocurrency isn't just about trading. It goes far beyond that, you know, and I think one thing that I've learned, and I think the founders of Binance have done so well over the last 8 years, is they focused on how less about talking about the technology, but more about talking around the utility and the benefits to the end user. So whether you're a trader who, you know, wants to trade digital assets, whether you're what we term a holder, and a holder is someone just buys a little bit of Bitcoin every week or a little bit of an altcoin every week and sits in it. You know, I met someone last night that's been buying Bitcoin $10 a week for 8 years. That's going to, you know, they're very happy, let's just say at the moment.
I guess so.
Or if you're someone, and that's why I love the Latin American market and specifically the Brazilian market, in how it's part of the everyday fabric of society where people are using it for payments. You know, we just did an integration with Pix, which I learned a lot about during our last, my last visit here last year. And, you know, I was blown away about the penetration of Pix and how it's been adopted across Brazil. And we've been lucky enough now to have an integration with a product we have called Binance Pay.
I'd say that Brazilians don't remember how to live without Pix anymore.
I know, but you know what's extraordinary? That's how we are about the internet. And that's our goal for how we would like it to be when it comes to crypto and digital assets. And I think that's what's really exciting about this.
How much of Web3 must a person know in order to use Binance's services or getting into this cryptocurrency culture?
So let me ask you a question. How much do you know about how Visa and MasterCard transactions work at the back end?
I don't know anything.
So that's what I'm going to say to you about Web3. You know, obviously it's good to have a base level understanding of it, but, you know, it's not about understanding the technical constructs behind the technology. It's about understanding how it's relevant for you. So, you know, one thing that I think Binance has done very well over the last 8 years is try and make it as simple as possible for people to access our platform and our app. And that's, you know, we're continuously obsessive about how do we make the user experience like frictionless and remove the barriers to entry, you know, and that starts with education and awareness about why people should be here. So we have lots of ways in which users or potential users can access education. We have Binance Academy, which is a masterclass equivalent to masterclass. We had 43 million people participate on that last year alone. I think there was 500,000 in Brazil alone last week. So it shows that the appetite is there. But at the same time, you know, I'm leaving this discussion with you to go straight back to a party, which essentially is, you know, we like to make finance fun. So it's a party where we're educating on crypto and how you can start, but also you can have a beer and have a, you know, hot dog and, you know, have fun with some of the community. So, you know, we try to meet people where they are at different stages, you know, of their journey.
What do you think, what's your opinion? I mean, in your opinion, why is Brazil so into cryptocurrency? I mean, you told me that lots of Brazilian people are using cryptocurrency. And why here?
Look,
do you have any idea?
Look, you've got 3 LATAM markets in the top 20. You have Argentina. You have...
I understand Argentina. They are having heavy financial
You have Mexico.
issues.
And you've got Brazil at number 10. Which is, you know, pretty extraordinary when you think about it. And I think, you know, we had 34% growth year on year in new registered users. It outpaced most of our markets around the world. And the reason that's happening, to answer your question, is, you know, there's a few factors behind that. One, I think you've got a very young and dynamic population here that is constantly looking at self-improvement and financial literacy. We see that across the board. It's not just in crypto. Secondly, you've got more phones than people.
Yeah.
And, you know, the main point of access for digital assets is through your phone. So, you know, that's one of the, you know, other big drivers of this. Thirdly, I think you've got a clear regulation now. You know, one thing that we know in order to continue to grow this sector, because it's a barrier for those people who've not entered in, is, you know, about how the user regulation and user protections are set up. And you have a clear regulatory framework being developed here, which is way ahead of the curve. You know, I'm Irish and we don't have one yet. And that's why we're only at 4.8% penetration in Ireland, as much as I'm upset by that. You know, you're way ahead of the US. The US is only at 6% penetration when it comes to retail, you know, everyday man adoption. So I think that's what's so exciting for Brazil is not only do you have a community and a population that's embracing this, you have all of the different stakeholders that are going to be important to the future growth of this, who are on board and realize that, first of all, this is something that's here to stay. Second of all, it's not just about trading. It's about the full, you know, the full suite of different use cases. So whether that be the trader or, as I said, the entrepreneur that's using, you know, Binance Pay or payment solutions to be able to transfer money quickly. Like, I didn't realize this. My sister-in-law is Brazilian. She's like, it took me 15 days to transfer money from Dublin to a bank account, you know, in Rio. She's like, yeah, that's not realistic. But that's not realistic in the days, you know, in the society we live in at the moment.
Yeah.
So we need to be able to move quickly and understand what we're paying for and when it will arrive and how quickly. And I think that's where the blockchain and Web3 solves a lot of those everyday issues as we live in this kind of increasingly globalized world.
I see. How many currencies are there being traded in Binance? A lot.
Oof, I wish I should know this. No, I should know this, but I think it's about 30,000.
No,
30,000? 3,000?
Yeah, let me check.
No, I think it's so. We have 3,000 cryptocurrencies. But let me explain to you how Binance works and how we evaluate, because that I think will be helpful.
Yes.
And I think it's really important for people to understand this. So we're an exchange. We're neutral. Why we exist is to give users what they want. So obviously that means we will provide all of the core assets. So, you know, Bitcoin is 65% of the market capitalization at the moment. So that's our core asset. But then other tokens are called altcoins. And we have many. I think it's up to 2,800 of those. And the reason we have those is because the users demand it. Now, what you need to know is there's volatility. Like, we're like the traditional finance industry. You know, if you invested in Tesla last year, you're not going to be very happy last week. You know, that happens in crypto as well. So that's why it's really critical when you are investing in these different currencies or tokens as we call them, that you do your own research. So you know who is the founding team behind it, what's the roadmap for their technology, you know, how transparent are they, how you know, you've been built on community, and the fans behind you. That's really similar to the, you know, to these projects and these currencies. They've got community behind them. So if it's a strong community, that's going to hold them up, you know, during volatile times. So really it's about like knowing, we always, you know, we call it doing your own research. So not dissimilar to the traditional finance space, but you secure, the information is much more accessible to you as an everyday user. Like you don't have to have a Bloomberg terminal like an investment professional might. You're able to access that, you know, looking simply at the platform or CMC or these different ranking sites. So,
so 350.
Okay.
350.
Yeah.
And how do having Cristiano Ronaldo or Kabi or The Weeknd help you in this, in your goals, into reaching people? Because I guess I could say that when I talk to some friends about cryptocurrency, Bitcoins mostly, there is some kind of trust issue, you know? People with education should play a big role, but also having these guys, how do they help you, and how do you deal with these trust issues?
Do you like sports?
I do.
Would you say you're a big fan of sports?
I'd say so, yeah.
So the good news is sports is universal. And
That's
it's a way to connect with people at an emotional point. You know, it's about a passion that they're engaged with. And for me, and look, my background is in sports marketing and sports entertainment, so I'm probably a little biased when it comes to this. But, you know, think about it. When we work with Cristiano Ronaldo, I know it's not the real Ronaldo here, but when we work with Cristiano Ronaldo, who's a good he's a good second. He's a good second, as my sister-in-law tells me. But when we work with someone like that, you know, he's the GOAT in many ways, bar Neymar as well now. But he represents what is performance, what is resilience, what is being the best, someone who has lifted not only himself, but many of his family, friends, his broader community up. And he really kind of represents, you know, not a utopia, but he represents something to his fan base. We were built on, you know, there's a picture that our founder shared on Twitter earlier this week, and it's talking about the first week of Binance. And it's him with 8 of the founders in like a room with no windows, like barely any furniture. And they're sitting at a table, you know, eating out of boxes. And their laptops are there beside them. And, you know, he shared that this is week 1. And they worked 24/7 for that first 6 months. And within that first 6 months, they were already the leader by a long shot. And I share that story because you can automatically see the kind of shared story behind, you know, we're obviously not Ronaldo. We'll never claim to be. But, you know, the shared story that you can then build, you know, programs around. And at the same time, Ronaldo also gets to use Web3 technology to get closer to his fans and understand like insights and how they think and what they want. So it's kind of a win-win situation, you know, and for us, it's really about just allowing ourselves to invite, you know, being invited into someone's mind share, you know, at a moment where they are entertaining or enjoying around something that's passionate for them.
Pretty
so
cool.
That's you know, it goes far beyond, like we'll never just put a logo on an event or a logo on an F1 car. It always has to be like, what's the bigger story? How are we giving access to our community to this platform, or giving access to their fan base to our platform? So it has to be like mutually agreeable.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. I like to work like that too. Now, if we talk about the NFT market, how do you see it? I mean, it was a very hot topic some years ago. There were some games and people, lots of things happening. But how is it right now? And how do you see this market specifically in the future?
You know what, are you guys familiar with Labubu?
I am not.
Okay, I'm trying to think what would be a trend that would be big over here at the moment. Similar to like sports, or similar to kind of like these trends that you suddenly see pop up in everyday life. NFTs were a hype of the last cycle. And they were embraced by the art world, by the fashion world, by the sports world, because it was an easy entry point and an easy way to show that you were playing in this space. And what we saw is when we went through the last kind of bear cycle, the interest fell because people didn't see the value there as much anymore. Now we've moved on to other hype trends, like the most recent was meme coins. We're now going into what people are calling tokenization of assets, which is where you tokenize, real world assets such as real estate or
is that a big
water.
thing?
It's going to be the big next trend.
Okay.
And I think it's interesting because it's really at its basis level fractional ownership.
Are
So
people
that's interesting.
tokenizing companies?
It's incredible, the use cases. But when just going back to the NFT point, what I think we need to remember is, one, NFTs still have a lot of different type of applications. So I'm in marketing, and a lot of the tools we use haven't caught up with where our users are. So NFTs are actually a great way to rebuild your loyalty systems, because it's a way for you to connect directly with your users and give them benefits and perks in order, if they're engaging with you. So NFTs, if we look at the next spate of use cases, it will be really interesting for how we use them for loyalty schemes and how we update Web 2 companies and ensure that we're growing user loyalty through that, because you can have a direct access to perks. Or if you're someone that likes going to music concerts, I used to keep all my concert tickets when I was a little girl in a box under my bed. Now I can have them in my Web3 wallet and keep them as a digital memento. So there's lots of use cases still for NFTs. That doesn't mean they're still relevant. It just means the hype has gone down. And, now it's a little bit similar, and I used this analogy before, but to Google Glass. Do you remember when Google Glass was first introduced? Everyone wanted it. You had every fashion designer, every sports athlete using it. But the challenge was it was too early. And, we didn't fully understand why we would need Google Glasses. And because the benefits weren't clear, then it wasn't embraced by the retail audience. Yet the defense industry, the medical industry embraced it. And now we're starting to see versions of Google Glass come back into society and be used in different ways. So I think we're at that stage, with NFTs where they'll be relevant. They're just not going to have the same hype around it.
Now you mentioned the meme coins,
Yes.
right? Do they play a big role in this market?
So I'll give you a giggle. My husband works in traditional finance, and he was a little skeptical about, digital assets. So there's lots of debates in our house. And when meme coins were introduced, he just found them so fun. But he was someone who was into gaming when he was younger. And he was like, oh, this is fun and frivolous. And what's this coin? And, who's this? And why is Trump launching a coin? So his first investment was in meme coins. And I'm like, this is crazy. So then what I had to reset my mind around is meme coins are an amazing gateway to digital assets. Again, you really need to know who's behind them and what the roadmap is, and where they're going. But what I think is really interesting for marketeers, I can use that maybe search or that investment that you did in meme coin to then pivot you and educate you on how you can enter into the space in a more responsible way with, other assets. And I think that's what we need to remember. They're a gateway, but it's how you use that moment of interest or engagement and bring them down, the journey and show them, how to enter into the space responsibly. But they're very fun. I think all of us love following what price Trump coin is at the moment.
And why do you think people get into cryptocurrency most regularly? I mean, do people see buying Bitcoin as investing or as a way of having money kind of free?
I think there's so many reasons why people enter into the space. I think if you start in first chapter, it was because, I have a lot of friends who are gamers who are buying skins. And that's why they used Bitcoin, and acquired Bitcoin. And then they started understanding a little bit more about the Satoshi white paper and what the promise was. And they got interesting. I think I think there's a large majority of people who got into the space initially because the traditional finance sector had forgotten them and hadn't given them access, to tools. I live in the UAE now. I'm Irish, but I live in the UAE. And I was shocked to discover that my babysitter wasn't able to open a bank account because she, at the time before she joined us, didn't earn enough money to open that. So she was using crypto accounts in order to be able to send money home. So there's other people who are using it in a high inflation economy, like Argentina, where they're using it to protect their earnings and to be able to ensure, like Turkey, for example. Turkey's got 160% inflation at the moment. And it's crazy. Like the volatility. So that's one of the number one markets globally. Now, it's being used for many other cases, but that's one of the reasons why people first discovered it and entered into it. So I think the use cases are broad. Like we're seeing more recently people who are looking at investing in ETFs as part of, a diversification of their retirement funds. So that's what I love about this space. It exists and has a value proposition for everyone, depending. And we probably haven't even unlocked all the potential yet. But we're on a journey to do that. And we're lucky enough as Binance because of our user base. And, one thing I credit our founders, I credit them on a lot. What they built is extraordinary, but they are ruthlessly obsessed with the users and the community and how we can optimize and how we can be better. And that's how we learn what are the new products and services and innovations that we need to introduce.
I suppose there are many opportunities, especially now that we have AI rising.
Yeah.
And how do you guys look at AI and gamification and experiences to make things more interesting for the users?
Yeah, I worked on my first AI campaign. This is so funny. I worked on the IBM Watson campaign, I think it was nearly 12 years ago. Do you remember when IBM Watson had the AI played the game with the chess master? We worked on that in New York. And, so that's why AI has been around for a long time. It's just gone mainstream more recently. And the reason I bring that up is we've been using AI on our platform since inception. Obviously, it's become more and more sophisticated. But from a technology perspective, we're using it to improve, the user experience. So we're serving up the right products to you. We're using it to improve our user protection and security protocols so that we can be on 24/7. So if your account suddenly has a transaction that's larger or unexpected, we're able to trigger an alert that goes straight to you. So, it puts control back in your hands. From a marketing perspective, we operate in 180 countries. I don't have 180, individual marketeers in those countries. I've got a very big team, but, I'm using AI now on how I can hyper-personalize marketing. Whether that be through our campaigns and the images we're using, whether it be through the, multilingual, being able to scale in every language so we're relevant. And I'm so excited. I've just enrolled. I'm kind of scared. I'm middle-aged, but I'm scared of being behind on this trend because I think it's so important. And
I feel like that too.
I know, when you feel like you're sitting in the dark ages, you're like, oh my God, I'm going to become irrelevant, So what I have done is I've enrolled in a course starting in September where it's an executive course on how to understand AI applications and the use cases across not just marketing, but across business. And I've enrolled in that in UAE, but UAE, they've given every single person who lives in UAE, they partnered with OpenAI and have given everyone a pro ChatGPT account. That's how much they feel that AI is going to be a part of everyday life.
Wow, that's actually expensive.
I know they've done the same for Estonia. They've done that with UAE as
pretty
well.
Cool.
And I think that's pretty cool, but I think they're trying to use kind of these smaller markets as a way to understand how this scales. So for us, AI is super complementary as it makes our technology better, it improves our user experience, and ultimately it makes us smarter about our community. It allows us to be more connected, which is a dream for me when I'm a marketeer that's trying to synthesize a lot of information and understand what insights I can take from it to build better programs.
I see. Is there a target audience? I'll call them audience. Do you have a target audience that you feel that should be using crypto more than that's not going on right now?
Well, 3 years ago when I joined Binance, all of my mentors, all of my family and friends called me and told me I was being crazy. And I bring that up in the context of there's a few different audiences that we're starting to slowly introduce and they're coming in. One of the individuals that was really strong-minded about it was my father. And, he's always been very proud of how hard I've worked to get to where I am. He's also loved the free tickets from the sports events. So he was like shocked. He was like, you're moving from this industry into this industry when you're at the pinnacle. Why are you doing this? And at the time he was like, no, he's a mathematician. So he was like, it doesn't make sense to me. I don't understand this. And what's so interesting is 8 months ago, he called me and he's like, okay, I put my hand up. I made a big mistake. You did make the right decision. And I missed out on the best financial advice I ever should have taken by not buying a little bit of Bitcoin. Mm-hmm. And I bring that up because that's the kind of the type of individual, someone who's more conservative, who maybe is skeptical about this space. So we're constantly looking at ways we can bring that audience in. And it's both genders. That's men and women. Women is an area where I'm delighted to say we're 50% as an organization, female, male. Mm-hmm. Our leadership team, our management team that I sit on is, 38% female, which is very unusual in the financial space. And, one of the co-founders of Binance, who, really was the backbone, is female, Yihi. But I think that we just need to look at those different types of users, whether it be startup founders or whether it be my dad and his age group. He'll kill me if I say the age, but those, and think about, okay, what's the education that we need to provide them? What are the products and services that we need to provide? And how do we make this relevant to them? Because if the benefits are there for you automatically, that's going to make you want to jump in. The biggest challenge we've had is we just haven't been able to reach that scale because the industry has just grown at such a pace. Every day you wake up, there's a new development. Mm-hmm. So I think that has to be the laser focus for, this next year, as we continue to grow.
I see. You talked a little about education. Actually, education has been part of, it has permeated everything we talked about here right now, right? But this education is key to make people actually use crypto, right? Do you guys plan these education, courses differently across the globe? I suppose that here in Brazil, since we have such a large market, I guess you have a way of working it here and then a different way of working it in Ireland, for example. Yeah,
we try to be very local in our execution around educational initiatives. So there's a couple of big initiatives that we'll run at a country level. So Binance Academy that I mentioned, our masterclass, that's localized in local language. The content is always about trends or items that are really popular at that moment in the local country. That's what we're pushing out. We'll support that by meetups, which are, I've already mentioned, which are events. It can be a 50-person, coffee and donut, or it can be a 1,000-person event like we have tonight where it's, beer and pizza. And that's a way where you can, similar to how when we were younger, we were probably brought into the bank with our parents where they were having the conversations with the teller. It's like the modern day version of that. We partner, we've just finished an amazing 18-stop tour in Brazil with some of the top universities to educate on this space and how students can leverage it, whether it be about starting their own businesses in this space or whether it be just simply being a user. It's about kind of opening their minds up to this. We're really lucky to be able to, partner with some of, the leading media and local entertainment individuals, which also kind of help reinforce that this is a trusted space because they do their due diligence. They're not going to work with just anyone. We work with an amazing influencer called Il Primo here, who's a character. And he's, obviously financial education is one of his core pillars. So that's a great way to get content into the minds of individuals who maybe don't want to follow a Binance social account. They much more, think about it. Can you remember the first time you heard about crypto or Bitcoin? Oh, it was around 2019, maybe. Wow, that was early. Yeah. But everyone's got a story where they were introduced to it in some way. So ensuring that we're working on word of mouth methods of communication is really important. Yeah. So I think that runs the gamut in terms of education. But we also have this amazing group of people. And one of our strongest communities here is our Binance Angels. And these are incredible. They're 600 strong now around the world. We have, I think, about 30 here in Brazil. And they are individuals who were early to crypto, way before you and I got in. They're people who've benefited from that space personally. And now, they volunteer. They don't get paid to do this, which I'm always shocked when people do this without getting paid. I don't know whether it's the Irish in me, but they volunteer and they do that, and they work online and they work at events to help show people and remove the blockers to people to enter.
Have you ever heard of a guy named Daniel Fraga?
Yeah.
Oh, he's a legend around here. Nobody knows where this guy is. He's probably in El Salvador, maybe.
I know, it's amazing. I know, it's amazing. But it's these people who, and I spoke to one individual last night, and he got into this, and I was like, how did you get into it? He's like, I wanted to be, he's only 23 now. So I think he got in when he was like 17. And he opened up an account because of age getting through his mom's account. And he was like, I was going to be a trader. I was going to be a hardcore trader. But he's like, my mom wanted to ensure she was in the space too. So I set it up so she was able to put 10 USDT, buy $10 worth of BNB and $10 worth of Bitcoin every week. That was 7 years ago. And now he's realized that even though he was a trader for 3 of those years, his mother's portfolio is doing better than him because she was just consistent and saved a little every week. Like that's one of the things I think we really need to encourage. Bitcoin's at 117,000 today. You don't have to spend 117,000 to enter into this space. You can buy a small fraction. A Bitcoin, you can buy $10 worth, you can buy $2 worth. And that's how you can start your journey. And, that's what I think is the beauty of this industry. It really is accessible to everyone.
You're saying that it's not too late to get into that.
No, not at all. We're still so early. I think we're at the really, as much as I need more sleep, but, we're still at the early stages of this. I think we've 3 or 4 years before this goes mainstream fully. So, anyone that's interested in taking their first step into this today, I would argue it's like as right a day as any to do it, and not to cry over, not being in it 7 years ago. I always regret.
Almost convincing me.
But really, it's like it's an opportune time, and one thing I will say that's been such a big part of driving the momentum behind this space recently is, 2 years ago, none of my friends in finance or institutional were entering into the space. And in the last year alone, we've seen BBVA, we've seen Santander, Goldman Sachs has revealed that they've got a large amount on their P&L sitting in a Bitcoin treasury. And we're only seeing that continue to grow. These are individuals that have every insight and data point at the end of their fingertips.
That's right.
And they've decided that this space is here to stay. So if they're getting involved, and that's one thing, I'm really grateful for that because it really even adds more legitimacy to this space. And as a marketeer, I'm going to capitalize on that as much as I can.
I guess so. And how do you see, you actually mentioned that we still 3 or 4 years before it goes mainstream?
I think so. Now that's my personal take. That's not a Binance take, because who knows what could happen tomorrow that might drive that even faster.
But do you expect something to happen tomorrow?
I have learned in this industry that you never know what's going to happen on a daily basis. I didn't expect, when I first joined this industry, I didn't expect the US to do a full U-turn as they have done on the industry.
I see.
I didn't expect to suddenly be getting calls from some of, my former clients, at CAA, the football athletes being like, should I start taking my wages in Bitcoin? That's where I always am pleasantly surprised about the developments in this space and how they kind of, on top of a lot of work that my team does, I don't want to say it's all easy, but that they're propelling us forward. So I think that's, I always operate from a basis that, you have to be ready for any surprise, good or bad.
Well, yeah, I guess so.
It's just society, the way we live now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So, Rachel, thank you for coming. Thank you for the conversation. We have some valuable insights here. I hope it worked for you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me, and hopefully we'll get to come back soon.
Well, yeah, sure. Thank you.